Hey, guys, welcome to Out of Left Field. Graham McGowan here along with Chris Furry. Chris over in England did not make it to Germany this weekend. So, Battle, I know you had a chance to go see a couple of older places today. What was that like? You were telling me about it this morning.
Yeah, I was in Lincoln today, and so Lincoln is not a small town, but it's a smallish town in a place called Lincolnshire. Yes, it is named for the city of Lincoln, and it has a Norman castle, which was built in about 1060 AD. Normans, if you don't know, are a Norse descendant people, almost Viking-like, but not quite. But they're from France, and they come from Normandy. Quite obviously, they're called Normans, and they came to the UK. Well, they came to the British Isles shortly after the Romans left. The Anglo-Saxons kind of ran the place at the time. The Anglo-Saxons and the Britons are close relatives. The Britons are the original settlers of the island. The Normans came in the 1060s, and they basically took over. There was a place in England where I am now that was under what's called Danelaw, and Danelaw is Viking territory, and the Vikings were here, and they ran this place, and the Normans ran them off. And they established Catholicism. The church was really important to them, and they established Catholicism here. And they built a castle in Lincoln called Lincoln Castle in 1066-ish. And then in 1100, they built a cathedral, a huge Catholic cathedral. Think Notre Dame, only a little bit smaller. And it's been in active service since the 12th century, since the 1100s, and it still, to this day, has services every Sunday as a Catholic church, and it's incredible. It's awe-inspiring to look at.
Very cool. And I know you mentioned also that, and we're not going to obviously give a history lesson, but that there was one of 4 original copies of the Magna Carta was there as well? Right.
So there are four copies in existence of the original Magna Carta, which was penned in 1215 AD. And the interesting thing about the Magna Carta, and I won't give us a history lesson too much, but the interesting thing about the Magna Carta is the first document written that establishes things like habeas corpus, due process, those sorts of things that we draw our democracy and our freedom from in the Western world are written in the Magna Carta. And this is something that the British sort of constitution, they don't have an actual written constitution, but the British sort of fundamental established law is based on this Magna Carta. Our own constitution is based on this Magna Carta, and one of the 4 original copies is in Lincoln, and you can view it in kind of a dark room.
It's funny you mentioned, as we kind of transition in our Constitution, kind of keeping on that same topic, I don't know if you guys have heard, but there is going to be a first in Major League Baseball and U.S. military history occurring this weekend. July 3rd, the Atlanta Braves and the Miami Marlins will become the first teams ever to play a professional sporting event on an active duty military base. Now, granted, we've seen the NCAA basketball, they do things where they're playing on aircraft carriers and stuff, but this will actually be on the base. We were very fortunate this week to have Atlanta Braves announcer Chip Caray join us to talk about the game, how the Braves clubhouse is feeling going into the game with where the Braves are going baseball-wise, and just what it means to them to have a chance to do it. So please stick around with us and listen to Chip Caray joining us on Out of Left Field. Hey, guys, Graham and Chris here. We are here with Chip Caray, announcer for the Atlanta Braves. Chip, how are you doing? Thank you very much for joining us today.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. My pleasure.
That's great. We're really glad to have you here, Chip. We just wanted to start with a couple of questions. The first one I wanted to start with was something pretty easy. The Atlanta Braves are going to be one of the first 2 teams to play a Major League Baseball game on an active military installation. They're going to be playing at Fort Bragg. And I just wanted to know What's the feeling inside the clubhouse? How are the guys feeling about playing a game on an active duty military installation?
Well, the first term that comes to mind immediately is honored. I think all of us with the Braves organization are very, very excited and thrilled and humbled that the Braves and the Miami Marlins were asked to participate in a game like this. In so many ways, we are so grateful, so appreciative of the sacrifices and commitments that the men and women of our military make to preserve our freedoms and to keep us safe, and that they do so willingly and as a volunteer fighting force is just incredible to see these 17, 18, 19-year-old kids doing the incredible things that they do for freedom and democracy all around the world. In a way, it's almost sad that this is the best we can do, because the people in uniform deserve so much more than just a baseball game. But I think it's a great gesture for Major League Baseball on this Independence Day weekend that we salute the men and women of the military, the guys that are out on the front lines fighting, those who haven't made it home, those who have made so many physical sacrifices with the injuries they have suffered, and a chance to say thank you to the families at home who've made those sacrifices so worthwhile. It's a great gesture by baseball, and to do it on the 4th of July weekend, I think, is just a great tradition, one that I hope will continue, and I hope the game will be good, and obviously from a Braves perspective, I hope we can win it.
Without a doubt, and certainly coming from two guys that were in the military, Chris being a disabled vet, I know that it's awesome for us to see, especially because the field is going to be turned into a field for multiple fields actually for active duty soldiers assigned to the base. On a more baseball-related note, I don't know if you've heard this. Is there any concern with the Braves about the replay system? Normally, everything goes back to New York, where everything is seen by multiple umpires there and the review coordinator. Because it's in a stadium that's being built just for this game, everything is going to be self-contained. Are there any worries about how reviews are going to be handled? I know it's still the same where you can't argue it, but any concerns there with Snicker or anything else like that?
I doubt it. I think if you asked a lot of the players on both the Braves and Marlins, they'd probably tell you they've had enough of replay. To be honest with you, I think it's a system where it's the best intentions, but it's still very, very difficult to execute properly and consistently. There are a lot of people, myself included, who believe that it's a game that should be decided by human beings, and that there is human error that's inherent in the game, and it starts with a strike zone. Which isn't done via replay and probably could be, but it takes the human element out of the game. And I think that people like to see the arguments. They like to see the managers getting thrown out. They like to see guys like Jeff Francoeur tossing their hats and getting thrown out of the game. It adds a bit of excitement. It's something that was a Braves tradition when Bobby Cox was here.
I was just going to mention that.
Right, with all the ejections that he had. But as far as implementing the system, no, I don't think there will be any concerns. The game is going to be televised by ESPN. They're going to have a whole army, if you will, if you pardon the pun, of TV replay trucks and production facilities, and it would be very easy for them to set up monitors to show all the angles and replays in a secure spot away from the TV productions or the radio productions of the Braves and Marlins, respectively. So the implementation of it, no, it'll probably be a much more streamlined process. And as I said before, hopefully there won't be any close calls that require replay. But if there are, I think a lot of guys would be happy if it just went bye-bye.
Okay, we get that a lot. Chris and I tend to argue on that a lot. And I umpire myself, and I see both the good and the bad. On something that's probably a little bit more the bright side for Braves fans. I know you were getting. I think I just had Hank Aaron out there pulling the number down on the left field wall for a number of games left at Turner Field, but SunTrust Park is on the rise. A lot of new drawings have come out in Cobb County there. What can you tell us about the park? I know there's a lot of excitement. Are we going to get Skip and Pete's Barbecue moving from Turner Field to SunTrust Park?
Yeah, I don't think Skip and Pete's is going to make the cut at SunTrust Park, unfortunately. But there will be a whole lot of other great food offerings and concession offerings for the fans. Obviously, the Braves are very thrilled about their new ballpark. It gets them out of downtown, which is Turner Field's a great place. It's a beautiful ballpark, great place to watch a game. There have been a lot of great players and a lot of great memories there. But the number one complaint that our fans have is ingress and egress from the ballpark. It's located at the confluence of three major highways. And at the time of day when we play our games, that's right in the middle of rush hour, and it's almost impossible for people to get into or out of the ballpark with a great deal of convenience. There's hope that SunTrust Park will alleviate some of those concerns. It's an intersection of two major highways. but with 14 or 15 different ways to get in and off the site. The difference, too, is SunTrust Park is unlike in downtown Atlanta where our current ballpark is located. There's going to be the Battery, the mixed-use development, and there'll be shops and bars and restaurants and condos and grocery stores and all of that, entertainment venues, which we hope, and I think the Braves are hoping, will encourage people to get to the ballpark at, say, 2 o'clock instead of rushing in at 5 o'clock to see batting practice, and make it a full day. And then if it's a good game and a beautiful night, stick around, have a slice of pizza, a glass of wine, and then get in the car and head back home so as to avoid the outflow of people heading home after an exciting day at the ballpark. So, yes, they're excited about it. It's going to seat 41,500 people. A lot of things for kids to do. There's a full menu, if you will, of restaurants and things to do. Just about every taste and every budget will be accommodated. And it really is going to be a new era for Braves baseball, both on the field and in the surrounding areas. And obviously everybody's excited about a new start.
Well, I can really see how that could be a boon, not only for the Braves, but also for the city of Atlanta. I think having a new place to play would be great. But let's be honest, the thing that brings people to the ballpark is how the Braves play. And lately, the Braves have been playing pretty well. They've been kind of a conundrum this month. You know, Freddie's bat's really heating up. They go in and they take 2 of 4 from the Giants, who are one of the hottest teams in baseball right now. They go take 1 from the Cubs, who are the best team in baseball right now, and then sweep the Mets on the road. I mean, who are these guys all of a sudden? Is this a team? Is this a young team that's starting to coalesce, or is this just one of those offensive spikes that you see throughout the course of a long season?
Well, I think there's a little bit of both of those things in your question. Number one, let's think back to the way the season began for the ball club. They lost 9 straight games. Bud Norris was in the starting rotation and pitched very, very poorly. Julio Teheran got off to a slow start in rotation. The Braves bullpen was in a state of flux. They didn't know who was going to close. Jason Grilli and Jim Johnson were both pitching at less than 100%, trying to come back from injuries. Braves didn't even have a left-hander in their bullpen until the final days of spring training when they bought Eric O'Flaherty's contract from the Pittsburgh Pirates. Freddie Freeman started hitting $180. Nick Markakis was the only guy hitting over 300 for the club. Jace Peterson hit 180. Eric Ibar got off to a terrible start. Adonis Garcia was making errors. Hector Olivera was on this team still. Couldn't hit the side of a barn. He was Ender Inciarte got hurt in the 3rd game of the year. So just about everything that could go wrong did go wrong on the field. And then you multiply that by the fact that the Braves' first 48 games were rated by ESPN as the most difficult schedule in Major League Baseball. They played the Cardinals and the Nationals and the Mets and the Royals and the Phillies, who were playing great baseball. It was just winning team after winning team for the Braves, who were in the middle of a rebuild. So it was a perfect storm that ultimately cost Freddie Gonzalez his job, and Brian Snitker came in. Well, all of a sudden, the pitching started getting better. Bud Norris went to the bullpen, came out of the pen, started pitching well. Julio Teheran started throwing up zeros. The bullpen settled in with Grilli and Johnson starting to pitch a little bit better and Vizcaino figuring things out. They got big contributions from guys like Gordon Beckham and Chase Darno, and Tyler Flowers started to swing the bat and catch the ball consistently. So all those things that went wrong for the Braves in the first 6 weeks started to change around mid-May. And as you said, the team's played a lot better of late. They won 12 games in June. Last 15 games, they had a 3.0 ERA. They're scoring their fair share of runs. Freddie Freeman's the hottest hitter on the team right now. And as we've said so many times all spring long, if Freddie Freeman hits, this team has a chance to be competitive. If he doesn't, they're going to struggle to score runs. And fairly or unfairly, Freddie's the linchpin for this Braves team offensively. So to answer your question, the bigger picture, this is a young team. You're going to see ups and downs like that. You're going to see some brilliant pitching performances, and you're going to see some absolute disasters out there, because that's what happens with young kids learning on the job. But the Braves are very excited about Teheran, Whistler. It's always a thrill to watch Mike Foltynewicz pitch. He's really learning how to pitch. That's fun. We've seen Cabrera come out and throw 103 miles an hour out of the bullpen. Jace Peterson's back from the minor leagues and leading off and playing great. Malik Smith was swinging the bat real well, playing great baseball before he got hurt. So in a season where there have been an awful lot of disappointments, we all have to keep our eyes on the bigger picture, which is the future. And the future looks very, very good for this team with the young players that are coming up, especially the pitchers. And with the international draft coming up tomorrow, there'll be some more new names to get excited about. And this process of jump-starting the Braves' way through the farm system is well underway and further along than a lot of people could have imagined. And it wouldn't surprise me to see the Braves make dramatic leaps in the second half of the season and even bigger leaps starting in 2017 in the new ballpark.
It's funny that you mentioned Mauricio Cabrera. Looking into him, there were some concerns with his command when he was coming up. I mean, he's throwing the lights out of the ball. I've heard a lot of comparisons to Aroldis Chapman, obviously with the velocity. Are we seeing more, kind of seeing him define that command, really find the strike zone, and begin to work it with the heat? And now that he's made the big club, it is really getting more major league style coaching from the from the bullpen, from the pitching coach. What's the growth that you've seen of him since he's been called up to the big club?
Well, I haven't seen much because he's only pitched in a couple of games. But you're right. He throws 103 miles an hour, and that's certainly eye-opening. But it does you no good if you can't throw strikes with it. And the biggest difference between AA guys and AAA guys and Major League guys is command. Bobby Cox had a saying that Major League hitters, if you throw straight fastballs, no matter the velocity, at some point they're going to hit it because they can time a jet. And, just throwing 103 for the sake of throwing 103 doesn't do anybody any good. You have to command it, and you have to command the strike zone. When guys like Chapman and when guys like Cabrera or Vizcaino or even Chris Medlin don't command the strike zone, they're going to get hit or they're going to issue walks and they're going to run into trouble. That's been plaguing Vizcaino, who doesn't throw 103 but throws 99 over his last 3 or 4 starts. So these guys are getting a chance to learn on the job. My partner Joe Simpson has used the term opportunity an awful lot, and these youngsters are getting a chance and getting an opportunity to open the eyes of the Braves coaching staff. They're getting a chance to be rewarded for good work in the minor leagues. But ultimately, as hard as it is to get to the major leagues, it's a lot harder to stay here. And if you're coming out of the bullpen and not throwing strikes and getting people out, you probably won't be here very long. But we're excited about Cabrera. We're excited about a lot of the young arms the Braves have coming up the system. And that's the best part of the job this year, is seeing these kids get to the major leagues and seeing how the pieces will all fit together in the years ahead.
So one question that I wanted to ask, obviously, to be really competitive in the East, the Braves need bats and they need arms. But how should the Braves address this? Is this something that the Braves need to address in the offseason or in free agency? Or you mentioned the farm system is really coming along. Is this something that you think that they can address internally, or is this something that they need to go out and they need to find bats and arms to make this team competitive?
Well, I think it's going to be a combination of all things. Again, I don't work for the Braves. I work for the TV people. So,
Sure.
anything I say here is just my opinion. But I do agree with John Coppolella, the Braves general manager, when he has said that pitching is the currency of baseball. If you have lots of pitching, you can do a lot of things with it. Obviously, you have players that are going to play for you at the major league level. You have players that can provide depth at the major league level. And you have excess players or pitchers that you can trade to get what you don't have. It's no secret that the Braves don't have a lot of major league ready bats at the top part of their farm systems, but they do have arms. So I would guess that some of that young pitching that they've acquired and developed may be moved to go get impact bats. The free agency class this year is not considered to be a very, very strong one. The really good class is coming online before the 2018 season, and after the Braves have been in their new ballpark for a year, I would assume that the Braves would have a great chance to jump into those waters and go get an impact bat. How would Bryce Harper look in a Braves uniform, for example? He's a pending free agent going into the 2018 season. So those are the kinds of players that you can certainly see the Braves bidding on with the new revenue streams that the ballpark will provide. But as I said, it ultimately comes down to one thing. If you don't have young players, young, inexpensive players that you have drafted and developed and gotten to the big leagues coming to your team on a consistent basis, you're dead in the water. And the effect of that is being felt now. Under the previous administration, the Braves went and signed a lot of free agents. They traded for veteran players, Dan Uggla, Derek Lowe, Justin Upton, B.J. Upton. All those guys were either signed for or traded for by this team. And while they had a good year with Atlanta, it didn't result in a world championship, and it didn't result in a playoff victory in a series. So even going back to the Bobby Cox years, there was always a young player or two that came up and contributed in a big way to this team. About Ryan Klesko and Mark Wohlers and Mark Lemke and guys like that, David Justice, for crying out loud. That's the lifeblood of your franchise. Yeah, exactly. I mean, those guys are the lifeblood of your franchise. And the Braves have had to make some very, very painful and difficult financial decisions regarding players. They've had to make some very difficult and sometimes unpopular deals to trade well-known players to restock the farm system. But that's because the effects of some poor drafting and some poor decisions that didn't work out are felt 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And that's where we are. We can wish it away, but that's the reality that John Hart and John Coppolello were dealt when they took over a year plus ago. But
and I have to imagine you're talking about Andrelton Simmons and Craig Kimbrell when you're talking about the big pieces really going away. Even the Upton brothers. Obviously, Justin was a big one that when he left. I know they were trying to shop DJ or Melvin Upton Jr. to really get his contract out of there. But I know that was a big loss for them when they really kind of unloaded a lot of the big contracts.
Well, and they had to, because if you look ahead, Justin Upton was approaching free agency. The Braves were not going to pay him $150 million. Jason Hayward was approaching free agency. They weren't going to pay him $127 or $133 million that he got with the Chicago Cubs. The Braves economically weren't there, and I think they felt from a baseball standpoint that those two guys weren't going to be worth collectively $300 million. And if you look at their stats this year, I think you'd say the Braves made the right decision, and they traded those players and got a lot of good young talent that came back. Inciarte, Swanson, Tyrell Jenkins. The list goes on and on. Plus, they saved the $300 million. So we can cry over spilled milk. We can debate whether those deals were right or wrong. Time will tell. But the bottom line is the Braves had an empty box as far as their farm system was concerned for the most part, and they've done an awful lot of work to fill that box up. Hopefully it'll overflow with good talent. And, again, only time will tell. We just knew the path that they were on was going to be unsustainable in the near and long-term future.
For sure. And you mentioned Dansby Swanson. I know he has been selected to the Futures game out of the Braves organization out of AA, so I'm sure that's a big, obviously an honor for him and a real highlight for the Braves organization to see a prospect that they pick up from Arizona really doing that well and being recognized for that. You mentioned Freddie Gonzalez losing his job, and I'm not going to get into that with what happened, the way things happened. It's already been reported. But from the inside, what differences do you see between Freddie and Brian Snitker's managing style? The way that he's kind of come in and the Braves seem to have responded, and I know the arms came alive, and that may or may not be a direct result, but what differences, positives or negatives, do you see with Brian jumping in now that Freddie was obviously relieved of his managing duties?
Well, they're both Robbie Cox disciples. Freddie's a great guy, a great man. He's a friend. I feel the same way about Brian Snitker. As I said before, I don't think Tony La Russa, Bobby Cox, Casey Stengel, Johnny Keane, any of the great managers in Major League history could have won with the team that Freddie Gonzalez had coming out of spring training. It just wasn't going to happen. And so to answer your question, what is the biggest difference? Well, winning cures all ills, and the Braves have played much better baseball. There's no debating that. And that's because, as I said earlier in our chat, guys that weren't hitting are hitting. Guys that weren't pitching well are pitching. Guys that were brought in to catch the ball and throw the ball effectively weren't and are now. You've had the influx of Malik Smith. Some of these youngsters who've come up from the minor leagues have stepped in and done a nice job, including Chase Darno. Gordon Beckham's been in and out of the lineup. So what makes a manager look good? Well, good players, number one, and good results, number two. And Brian Snitker has done that. I think for Freddie Gonzalez, I think there was a great sense of relief for him that he didn't have to preside over a team that wasn't going anywhere and a team that just, for whatever reason, you're not going to fire the 25 guys, so somebody's got to go. And the Braves made a determination, as John Hart said on our air, that Freddie Gonzalez, fairly or not, was not going to be the manager going into SunTrust Park next year, and so why keep him on? Brian Snitker's been an organizational guy. He knows the Braves way. He's very familiar with the culture, and he's come in and said, look, guys, let's just go out and try to win today, and let's play hard. Let's have fun. Let's try to win today. Let's not try to get 9 wins in a row. Let's win 1 in a row and then see where that takes us. And so I think once that cloud was lifted, once the talk of who's getting fired or who's getting traded sort of hovers over a clubhouse, it does poison the atmosphere to a certain degree. And once that was lifted, I think it was like, okay, here's where we are. Now here's what we have to do. And so far, Brian's done a nice job. As I said, the team had its best month in June. They won 12 ball games and looked pretty good over the last couple of weeks. So as we head to the All-Star break, that's very encouraging.
Do you think that if they can keep managing to manufacture these wins over the course of the season, do you think that that's going to translate into Brian Snitker being named full-time manager at the end of the season, or do you think they're going to go out and look for someone?
I have no idea how that works, and that's way above my pay grade. I know that Brian's a great guy. He is highly respected not only by the Braves but in other major league organizations. He's a Brave, period, end of story. Whether that means he's going to manage the Atlanta Braves or the Greenville Braves or the Rome Braves or the Gwinnett Braves, I don't think that really matters to Brian too much. Of course, he loves being in the major leagues. He's earned it as a 40-year lifer. But you've got Eddie Perez and Terry Pendleton on this staff, who are two tremendous people and two tremendous baseball guys, and also very steeped in the Braves tradition. I'm sure they'll get interviewed and get talked about. And I would assume, and again, I want to be very clear, I'm not the general manager, but I would assume that all cards are going to be on the table. They'll look at everything and evaluate and see what the best move is for the Atlanta Braves first, because that's the name of the game. And if that means it's Brian Snitker or Eddie Perez or Terry Pendleton or somebody else, I'm sure that's what the Braves Brain Trust will do. But I would say right now Brian Snitker's done an excellent job. I think everybody's happy with the job he's doing. The team's trending in the right direction. And I'll say this, they're playing awfully hard, and as they did under Freddie Gonzalez. They're just getting better results right now, and that's good to see.
Mr. Carey, I just wanted to say, from a personal standpoint, it has been an absolute honor talking baseball with you today, and I really appreciate you being willing to come on and help us out.
Hey, my pleasure. You guys ask great questions, and it's an exciting time to be a Braves fan. I know that all of us get wrapped up in the wins and losses, and ultimately that's how we're judged, because your record is indicative of who and what you are. But I hope people understand, and the point we keep trying to hammer home to folks is that the future is very bright. If you look at the Cubs, you look at Kansas City, you look at the Mets, you look at the Astros, you look at the complete teardowns that those clubs did. It's painful. Losing stinks. It affects all of us. It's really, really hard. It's really hard to win, too. But to take those two steps forward that everybody's hoping Atlanta does, you've got to take a very, very serious look at the state of your franchise. And the people that were brought in made some very, very tough and gutty calls. They're doing it right. They've built a solid foundation. Now it's time for the sheetrock to go up and, put some paint on and add make an addition, get the bathroom, the kitchen's all squared up, and hopefully have a house that we can all be very proud of. Not just for 1 year, but for many, many years to come. And I really believe in my heart of hearts that they're headed in the right direction. And we'll look back on these, shall we say, retooling years with a great deal of fondness when the Braves are winning 90 and 95 games every year and say, boy, remember when? And that's the price you got to pay in professional sports. We're paying it, we're wearing it, but we're all confident in the direction we're going, and that's the best news of all.
Well, Chip, as a lifelong Braves fan, as a kid growing up watching the Magic when you were down here, I second what Chris said. Thank you so much for joining us. It really was a pleasure and honor to have you here, and hopefully throughout the rest of the season and the ongoing seasons, we can have you back, and hopefully we're talking about the Braves getting back to those division-winning ways when they took the record for the most straight division series wins, and we'll see a new banner risen at SunTrust Park.
It would be my pleasure, guys. You take care. Enjoy the Independence Day weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Chip. Be safe.
All right. Appreciate it.
Okay, guys. Take care.
And once again, our thanks to Chip Caray for joining us. A lot of good stuff there, and I know how excited they are to be going. I know how excited it was kind of for us finding out about this. We hadn't really heard about it at first. You're getting the chance to go to the home of the 82nd Airborne Division, one of the most famed units, probably along with the 101st in United States Army history. It's going to be a 12,500 seat stadium. It's been built on an old golf course. You actually can go and see. The renderings look fantastic, but seeing them go from what it was to what it is now is fantastic. And Major League Baseball has an industry growth fund. It's a joint venture between them and the Players Association, and the stadium is been fully funded and is going to be donated to Fort Bragg. It will be turned into a softball field and an event area for base personnel and their families to be able to have different things, different play games, that kind of thing. I think it's great.
Yeah, and one of the things that I can say, coming from the perspective of somebody who lived on an active duty base in Garrison, having a place like that where guys can go, have MWR facilities, and that's morale, welfare, and recreation facilities on post. Realistically, I think something like a softball field and an event area is gonna benefit that place a whole lot better than a golf course. I mean, don't get me wrong, golf is a great sport, I guess, but officers play golf, and soldiers play softball. And that's what they do. They get together and they hang out and they play a version of America's Greatest Game. And I think that having this sort of not just these professional style field, but a place that's been inaugurated as a professional field by having a professional game played on it is really going to benefit them.
I agree. And, the nice thing is that they're taking something that basically was sitting empty in an old, now unused course, have leveled it out. Major League Baseball personnel have actually been having to teach field personnel there because they're not actually having personnel from Turner Field where the Braves play or Marlins Park. It's going to be entirely separate individuals. They haven't learned how to care for the field, line the field. They're actually giving them training on how to properly deploy the tarp should inclement weather happen, which from what I'm hearing is a possibility. The one that I was curious to hear, and I know that Chip wasn't a big fan, like I said, is that replay will be contained at the stadium. You and I both have different feelings of replay, and that's a topic for down the road.
Right.
But it's going to be different. There is at the end of the day, with it being an ESPN game, like Chip said, you'll have plenty of cameras. I don't think it'll be a huge issue. But what I want to know is, and like I said in the interview, I've been a lifelong Braves fan. Growing up in Florida, the Marlins and the Rays didn't exist when I was a kid. I mean, until probably later into close to my teenage years, which is probably dating myself. But what was your take on Chip's, where Chip saw the Braves going? He didn't really, he had an interesting take with management and the way that bringing all those veteran contracts in kind of detracted from how the Braves have really always been, and that's they always focus more on their farm system and built from within, kind of what we're seeing the Cubs do now.
Yeah, and let's not take anything away from the Cubbies. I mean, the Cubbies have remodeled, and the Braves are remodeling now. And Chip did mention the farm system, and I think it's interesting that he did because you can see everywhere you go in the league that where a team has taken a real interest in their farm system, how it's paid dividends for them. I mean, look at the Giants. The Giants function on their farm system. And, there are several teams in the league that really do, and I think the Braves are really dipping into that. And I think the Cubs have really started to come around and started to function on their farm system. And that brings us into a really interesting topic about the Cubbies. This last week, Chris Bryant becomes not just the youngest person to hit 3 home runs in a game in a Cubs uniform, which
that boy
in
had
and
himself
itself,
a game. That boy had himself a game.
Yeah, I mean, he had himself a lifetime game. I mean, that was a once in a lifetime kind of occurrence. Not only, like I said, did he become the youngest Cubby to ever hit 3 home runs in a game, but he becomes the first player in the entire storied history of Major League Baseball to go 5 for 5 with 3 home runs and 2 doubles. Now, that may sound like one of those sort of statistics that you pull off the shelf and say, oh yeah, this is really great. But think about that. This guy goes 5 for 5, double, homer, homer, double, homer, and just lights up the Cincinnati Reds and scores. He has RBIs and he's scoring runs and he's killing it, and it upset the Reds. And you could really see that a couple nights later.
You did. And I want to point one thing out that I didn't get a chance to watch the game. Jake Arrieta homered in that game as well.
Right.
So as we're nearing the All-Star break, talking about pitchers hitting home runs, 5 hits isn't always looked at as a huge deal. We saw 5 hits the other day, but a lot of times that happens in extra inning games or games that are quickly out of hand. It's really the amount of total bases he had. He actually became the third player since 1900 to have a total of at least 3 homers and a total of 5 extra base hits. In 2012, when Josh Hamilton was still just raking the ball, he had one of the very few 4-homer games and a double. And then you have to go all the way back to 1954, where Joe Adcock had the same line, 4 homers and a double. This is what really ticked me off. They're playing in Cincinnati at Great American Ballpark. Okay? After the 3rd homer, the Cincinnati fans wanted a curtain call. They kept the cheering going. And Bryant didn't do it. Stayed in the dugout and said, quote, "I've never been the type to show it. I'm just not that kind of player," end quote. Which to me, that's pretty humble, especially for something for a feat that big.
Right. Well, not just humble.
It shows respect to the organization. Exactly. An organization that's had a rough season, a rough couple of years. Todd Frazier was a big piece. They let him go. He shows respect. And how do they repay him? They plunk him.
They repaid him. They repaid him exactly the same way that I've been railing against since we started this podcast. And they plunked him. And I hate that. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I don't think that it's the proper way to pay back a hitter for doing something that hitters are supposed to do. Yes, he took you yard, and he took you yard, and he took you yard, and then he hit 2 doubles. But you hit the guy, okay, listen, I understand MLB tradition, and you hit a guy for showing off, but he wasn't showing off. He was swinging the bat, and when you swing the bat, you swing the bat. It's just a numbers game, and when you're swinging the bat good, you're not going to back off of it because you're afraid someone's going to plunk you in your next at bat. But when you go in to the next game 2 days later on a Wednesday night and you plunk the guy in the 8th inning, I mean, that's not sportsmanship. That's not MLB tradition. That's just being a bad sport.
And David Ross had this to say, and we'll move off this because we've been on this topic plenty. And I like it because David Ross is the veteran. He's retiring after this year. Good catcher, played for the Braves for a while, the Red Sox. He said, quote, "We got good memories, and we play these guys soon. We got to protect our guys. Because you're mad about this or that, you can't go hit our star players. They got more to lose than we do. Sometimes frustration on bad teams comes out from players. I've been on bad teams before, understand that. They're going through a little rough patch, and I'm sure they're frustrated. But you can't take that out on us because we're hitting balls over the fence," end quote. The Cubs never retaliated in that game, but starting this Monday, there's a 4-game set at Wrigley. And we talked about the way that this should have been handled with the Rangers and the Jays on our first show, and I'm curious to see if Joe Madden has retaliation during this series or if he waits because they play in the same division. They're gonna face each other a lot, and umpires are gonna have a very short fuse for that kind of stuff after what we've seen this year. So I wonder if they're gonna wait until later in the season, maybe closer to the end of August, September time.
Right, and I wouldn't be surprised if they wait. Especially, I really wouldn't be surprised if they wait until Jumbo Diaz is pitching again. Until he gets into the game and is going to have to hit for himself at some point. I realize he's a reliever, so he's not in the box a whole lot, almost never. But there's going to be some sort of retribution for this. You don't just plunk a guy for having a great game. And like you said, they're playing again on Monday. And the Cubs have had a fantastic season. I mean, there's not really any other way you can put it. The Cubs have had a fantastic season, and they're getting back into. They've had a little bit of a downtime. They're getting back into it, and there are going to be aces throwing in those games starting on Monday. And are we going to see aces get tossed? I don't know.
It's funny you mentioned about him likely not being in the box to hit a pitcher. The Cubs have always done things. Well, Joe Madden has always done things a little bit different. He's more of a Tony La Russa disciple, and La Russa always had kind of a different mentality. He'd bat his pitchers 8th instead of 9th, kind of giving him 2 leadoff hitters. So Joe Madden decided to do something on the Tuesday game that I don't remember the last time I've seen. You and I were talking yesterday in that 19-inning game between Cleveland and Toronto. And a positional player, Darwin Barney, lost the game for the Jays, and a positional player won it for the Indians. So we've seen positional players come in to pitch. Well, how about pitchers playing positions, which is what happened. He had three different pitchers in left field. The game went 15 innings. They won 7-2. And two of them, it was Travis Wood and Spencer Patton, alternated pitching between pitching and playing left in the 14th. So instead of having to burn one, burn the next, he put one in left field, which is again where your weakest fielder goes. He'd call time, come out, switch him back. It's a defensive switch. There's no charge conference call. The only thing you saw Brian Price say was that, hey, he's only, no warm-ups. And the home plate umpire, I think, was Mike Everett, said, look, I'm going to give him a couple. And he gave him, I think, 2 or 3. But, yeah, you come in, there you go. And you've talked about this as a way to speed up the game, which, again, is a topic we'll get to later on, down the road in the show. But, I mean, I love Joe Madden, man. I would love to get him on the show because the way that he sees the game of baseball, it's so respectful to the game, but it is so stinking outside the box. It's so fresh and refreshing. I love it. I dig it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there are probably 2 top-notch tacticians in Major League Baseball right now when it comes to bullpens and pitching. And I know you're going to call me a homer again, but Bruce Bochy is one of them. And there's no arguing that fact. Bruce Bochy is a top-notch tactician when it comes to his pitching rotation and his bullpen. And this is something that you would expect to see in San Francisco from him. And we'll get into some of the things that he's doing later. But, I mean, what they're doing in Chicago is amazing. And how smart is it? I mean, it's genius. You got 2 guys who you want to have throw in the same inning, but you don't know if you're going to have a lefty or righty coming to the bat. And so how much sense does it make to put a left-handed specialist and a right-handed specialist in the game, put a guy in left field where you don't really need anybody, where he can play as a utility outfielder, and then when you need a left-handed specialist, you throw him in. When you need a right-handed specialist, you throw the other guy in. That makes so much sense that I'm surprised it's not something that we've seen more often. And to be honest with you, that really brings him up in that list of tactical coaches to me.
I agree, and I mentioned this last week, so I'm not going to sell him short. Buck Showalter is another great manager of bullpens. I mean, and we're seeing that with how Baltimore is playing. But I agree, man. It was hilarious to see these guys changing gloves back and forth coming in. But yeah, I mean, it does make sense because the likelihood of guys pulling it to the left field, it doesn't happen as often. So yeah, I really like seeing it because I thought it was very very different. But I mean, it was a neat thing to see. And like I said, he really just kind of marches to the beat of his own drum. He always has. It's why guys love playing for him. I mean, you see on Twitter all the time, and the Cubbies post things of the goofy things that he does. Where he'll have a magician come to the clubhouse to help guys kind of loosen up if they're on a rough patch. He has family days where he does a petting zoo at Wrigley Field for players and their families and their kids. They have the pajama flights and the superhero I mean, they do all kinds of crazy things, but in a 162-game season, he knows how to keep it light and fresh for those guys, and I think it's great. Like I said, hopefully we talk to Joe down the road, and he's willing to join us. Again, guys, if you want to have a chance to talk with us, get our take on things, you have ideas for the show, hit us up on Twitter at OOLeftField. You can email us at ooleftfield@gmail.com. And since we are on the topic of pitchers, and we're going to kind of, I think, finish out the show with that, because I refuse to let you end the show on a homer note, I am making a programming change while we're here.
Of course you are.
Madison Bumgarner did something that has not been done in, I believe it was over 40 years, or just at 40 years.
1971, as a matter of fact.
Okay. And he, as a National League player, hit for himself in an American League park against the Oakland Athletics. And not only did he hit for himself, not only did he bat for himself, he hit for himself. He went 1 for 4 with the double. Some guys want to say it was an error, it was a rough catch. 1 for 4 with the double, keeping it going. And there has actually, Bruce Bochy has come out and has said that he plans to use Mad Bum instead of a DH, and may actually begin to use him as a DH on nights where he is not playing.
Which, okay, now there's been a lot of pushback against that statement from Bruce Bochy about using Madison Bumgarner as a DH on nights where he's not hitting, because the consensus would be, well, that doesn't show any sort of confidence in the guys that you have sitting on the bench. But let's think about that for a minute. Yes, Madison Bumgarner is about a 180, 185 hitter right now. There was a time last season where he was hitting 250, but he's about a 180 hitter. In about 80 at-bats, 80, 85 at-bats, I mean, the guy hasn't had a whole lot of at-bats. He's a pitcher. He hits 2 or 3 times a night every 5 or 6 nights. And so people say, well, how bad are the guys on your bench if you're willing to look at a 180 hitter in a pitching position as your DH? I mean, what does that say about the guys on your bench? But think about this. Yeah, Madison Bumgarner is hitting 180, 185 as a pitcher with 80 or 85 at-bats, 90 at-bats. But who's a better hitter? Is Madison Bumgarner a better hitter at 180 with 90 at-bats? Or is one of the guys on the bench a better hitter at 230 with 12 at-bats? You see what I mean?
Exactly. I do. And actually, when I went and watched the Giants play the Rays a couple of weeks ago, Buster was DHing. He wasn't catching. And the catcher they have fill in, and I can't pull his name off. I'm sure you know it. The bat isn't the same. And right now, you're getting some decent production out of your outfield bat. Yeah, you're getting some decent – I think it's Gabe Sanchez, yeah. You're getting decent production out of your outfield bats, but with Hunter Pence out, there's a bat missing. I heard this the other day on – I believe it was Mike and Mike. Longoria. Wow, I have Longo written down, so that was embarrassing. Evan Longoria, Mark Teixeira, and Pedro Alvarez. 3 very good hitters. Agreed?
Yes. Well, how can you disagree?
Madison Bumgarner has a higher slugging percentage than all 3 of those players.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. So Madison Bumgarner might be hitting 180, but out of the hits that he has in those at-bats, the guy's hitting long balls. He's going yard. He's hitting doubles. I mean, we're not talking about a pitcher who comes out and hits a bloop single to right field and gets on base. No. This guy he rakes. And you can't take it away from the guy. Even MLB's own Twitter page, the actual MLB Twitter page, has every time they put Madison Bumgarner on and when he's swinging the bat, it's hashtag pitchers who rake, because he rakes. There's no arguing with it.
Agreed. And I just saw this stat on ESPN.com, and this is an article that came from the Associated Press. There is no name on it, but this struck me, and you just mentioned it. He's batting 175 this season, 2 homers, 5 ribbies, and 40 at-bats. He has 9 homers and 183 the past 3 seasons, and we've been to the numbers, but this is what got me. That home run rate, 9 homers and 183 at-bats, if he was hitting as a consistent player, that's a home run rate of 36 home runs had he been a full season hitter. So as a pitcher to have that is fantastic.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you look at a guy like Madison Bumgarner, and like I said, he might get to the plate 80 times in a season, maybe. The guy's had 190 at bats in the last 4 years.
183 in the past 3 seasons. Yeah. Yep.
Look at what he's done with them. And now, let's also not let's also take into account the fact that he's not just hitting home runs. The guy's hitting grand slams. He's got 2 grand slams in the last 3 years. And, not for nothing, but it seems like every time the guy goes to Dodger Stadium and plays against a certain ace from the Dodgers, he goes yard on him. And unfortunately, that ace right now, to transition a little bit, is a little bit thrown out. I think he hurt himself a little bit, and unfortunately, he went on to the 15-day DL yesterday, I believe, right?
Thursday. So they were Wednesday.
Right. My days are all messed up because I'm so far ahead of you guys.
Yeah. Wednesday there was concern. His back had been sore. According to Dave Roberts, the Dodgers manager, this has been an ongoing issue. It's bothered him off and on, and it finally flared up, and he was just – it tells you something that Kershaw, who's been on the DL once in his career, aside from this time, was so willing to fly back and miss a start Friday. He had an MRI done on his back and had an epidural shot. Found out that he has a mild herniated disc, should not require surgery. The biggest concern is, and this is really what Dave Roberts has been asked, is do the Dodgers believe that this is going to be, one of those stints where it's only going to be 15 days, or are we going to see a lot more time missed than just that? Scott Van Slyke, another Dodger player, had a similar injury with similar treatment, and I believe missed about 4 weeks, which could be huge because, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, we really see the Dodgers and the Giants being locked in on that NL West battle. And if there's one positive here, it's that his DL time also coincides with the 4-day All-Star break, which might give him some extra rest. But man, this could be big, especially with the way that their starting rotation has looked.
Well, and here's the problem. It's not just how their starting rotation has looked. It's how their starting rotation is winning games, or should I say not winning games. Because, and we talked about this the other day, Clayton Kershaw has 14 wins, and the rest of the starting rotation has not even equaled that number at this point. I mean,
actually, let me correct you guys. He's 11-2. Kershaw's 11-2 going to the DL.
Okay. Right.
Every other pitcher, I'm not counting Bud Norris. When I looked at this, it was before the trade went through. Every starting pitcher that has at least started, I'm sorry, a minimum of one game, their record is 13-24. A sub-500 record for every other starting pitcher aside from Kershaw.
Right. So it's not just the idea that Clayton Kershaw is going on the DL, and this might hurt for a little while. Clayton Kershaw is the winningest pitcher on the Dodgers rotation. And not just on the Dodgers rotation, but that includes the rotation, the bullpen, everyone. There is not a pitcher who can equal the number of wins as Clayton Kershaw. No one's pitching as well, and they're just not getting the job done without him. And here's the problem. Like you said, going into a National League West race against the Giants, who are firing on all cylinders right now, the Dodgers are going to fall way, way behind if they're not getting games picked up by Clayton Kershaw. And let's not pretend like a herniated disc is not something to be worried about as far as a season-ending injury. And if this ends Clayton Kershaw's season, I don't see the Dodgers going above 500 for the rest of the season.
I agree. I think if Kershaw is out for more than a month, that could seriously jeopardize their ability to make the wild card. Because we already made our picks, which our picks are up on Twitter, guys, at OOLeftField. Again, OOLeftField@gmail.com if you want to email us. The one positive they may have is, like I said, they picked up Bud Norris from the Braves. Right now, what is hopefully going to be good for them is that in comparison to Bud Norris's career stats, he's had 5 consecutive starts with compiling a 2.15 ERA. He went 4-1 for the Braves in those games. He also came in relief and has a 2.08 ERA for the month of June. So they have an arm who is pitching well, but big picture, he's been. I mean, he's an almost 4 career. He's a career 4.4 ERA. So he is by no means an ace. The one thing that made the silver lining for the Dodgers is not so much Brandon McCarthy, who's on the way back, but Chunjin Ryu, who was a big piece a year or so ago, is supposed to be nearing the end of a minor league rehab assignment and should be available likely sometime later this week, maybe after the All-Star break. So, I'm with you, man. This is big. This really is going to be, big to see what ends up happening with the Dodgers, because, that could change everything for them.
Right. And here's the bottom line. You give me a lot of hell, to be honest with you, about being a homer for the Giants. But the bottom line is I love baseball more than I love any other team, or more than I love any individual team. And to see a guy like Clayton Kershaw, who is a true ace, a true gamer, go out in a position where he could be the factor that changes whether or not his team makes the playoffs, it hurts. It hurts baseball. It hurts everyone, because I think that Dodgers-Giants race in the NL West was going to be a lot of fun to watch. And unfortunately, if this is a season ender, we're not going to get that, I don't think. I think the closest thing we're going to get at this point is maybe the Giants waving goodbye to everybody in the NL West as they move into the divisional series, because the Giants, the Dodgers are the only team that have a chance to catch them at this point, and I think that Kershaw is going to be a key to that.
I agree, and as you mentioned that, it brought one more thing to mind as we get ready to wrap up here. We talked about deliveries and the way that Bumgarner's delivery looks very fluid. The way that Kershaw almost falls off the mound is really going to affect him. He's very much of a downward motion, which is going to probably flare that back up. But what gets me is that if Kershaw is out for a very long extended period of time, which, again, I'm with you, I hope doesn't happen, that could change the landscape of the entire National League, because the Cardinals and the Pirates are still no slouch just because the Cubs have such a big record. So if all of a sudden the Dodgers, the clear second-best team in the West, lose their best pitcher, all of a sudden the Giants could very easily make a huge run through that through that National League West division and take the number one spot in the National League from the Cubs. The Cubs had their slump, which is going to happen, but they're playing in a division with two very, very good teams that have been in the playoffs consistently the last few years, and a Cardinals team who's we've seen win a couple of World Series. So I really hope that it doesn't come to that, but it could.
Well, yeah, you talk about winning a couple of World Series. Let's not forget this little statistic, that there were only 2 National League teams that represented the National League in the World Series from 2010 until 2015. And that was the Giants and the Cardinals. And if they didn't win, they went. And in the Giants' case, they won. And the Cardinals won 2 out of their 3. And when you have 2 teams that are perennial postseason teams like that, you can never count a team like the Cardinals out. And you can say whatever you want. And we'll talk about this at length in later broadcasts about what's going on with the Cardinals right now and their hacking scandal. We'll talk about that at length. But you can never count these guys out. And let's not forget that I don't think I've ever seen a season where Andrew McCutchen gave up mid-season. So the Pirates are never out. And when you got a guy who refuses to lose like McCutchen does, the Pirates are never out either. And these are teams that we could very well end up with both of those teams in the wild card, and then all of a sudden the landscape of the National League playoffs is very, very different.
It is, and I'll close with this. We mentioned just how big of a competitor that Kershaw is. He did not argue at all, according to manager Dave Roberts, about going on a DL, which tells you just how much discomfort he has to be in. We know he's pitched through a lot, but how much he actually had to be in to willingly agree with really no fight to go to the DL. Guys, thanks again for joining us. Thank you so much to Chip Caray of the Atlanta Braves organization for joining us today on an interview. We really appreciate it. Our first interview we had here on Out of Left Field. We hope you all enjoyed it. Have a safe and a happy 4th of July. Enjoy the game tonight from Fort Bragg. Just remember that those guys are always out there, even the ones you don't see. They're fighting, keeping us safe, and it was a great venture from Major League Baseball and for ESPN, to go there and give back.
Right. And remember, guys, 4th of July weekend, if you guys are going to go out and blow up stuff, I understand. Just be safe while you're doing it. And also be very mindful of the fact that you might have a disabled veteran who suffers from PTSD living on your block. So make sure that you're being respectful of those guys when it comes to fireworks and explosives, because it can cause a really bad night for them. And don't forget that every single week we will find something just wacky enough to be coming straight out of left field.